Hello, this is my first story time. Story time with Spunkidoodle. I'm going to be reading a classic, Dumbo, and I'm dedicating it to my nephew, Andrew. Happy birthday, Andrew. Dumbo. Early one morning, while most people were still fast asleep, a group of storks appeared in the sky. They had been flying all night and were very happy to catch a glimpse of a large tent surrounded by a group of smaller tents and trailers. "There, below! There's the circus!" shouted one of the storks as he released his bundle. Soon all the other storks let go of their parcels, and the sky was filled with parachutes carrying pink and blue bundles. A gentle breeze delivered the drifting arrivals right to the tents. Being the tallest, Mrs. Giraffe was the first to spot the bundles. "Wake up, everyone! The storks have come," she called. "Our little ones are here." Baby giraffes, tigers, hippopotami, bears, and kangaroos floated down to their waiting mothers. The animals ran this way and that to catch their young. A little lion cub was tangled up in a tree, but Mrs. Giraffe soon had him out and into his mother's arms. Mrs. Jumbo, the elephant, watched as one after another of the little animals arrived. Even after the sky was empty, she continued to search, straining her neck in all directions. "Oh dear," she sighed, "I was certain that there would be a bundle for me. Now I'll have to wait until next year." She began to cry. By mid-morning, the circus tents were folded and the animals loaded onto a train. The circus was moving to another town. Casey Jones, Jr. was a brave little engine, and he sang, "I think I can, I think I can, I think I can," as he climbed the hills carrying his heavy load. "Woo, woo," he whistled as he chugged slowly up the hill. And when he reached the top and began racing downhill, he sang faster. "I thought I could, I thought I could, I thought I could," and tooted his whistle with joy. As the train sped along the tracks, a small shape moved along the top of the cars. It was a stork, carrying a large bundle and shouting, "Mrs. Jumbo! Special delivery for Mrs. Jumbo!" Hearing the stork's shouts, two of the elephants stuck their trunks through an opening and waved. "Over here," signaled another with her trunk. The stork lowered his heavy bundle into the wagon. "Better late than never," he said, tipping his cap. "You better check to see if the goods aren't damaged," he said as Mrs. Jumbo untied the parcel. "He looks perfect," exclaimed Mrs. Jumbo, staring proudly at her new baby. His duty done, the stork bowed to Mrs. Jumbo and was on his way. The other elephants crowded around the new arrival. "Isn't he just adorable?" One of them cooed. "Looks just like his mother," said another, and the other elephants nodded their heads in agreement. All this attention was too much for the little one, and letting out a big sneeze, he shook his head, exposing two enormous floppy ears. "Take a look at those ears," said one of the elephants, stretching the ear with her trunk. "It's too bad that stork has already left," sniggered another. "You should file a complaint for damaged goods." The elephants all began to laugh. "I never saw anything so dumb-looking in all my life. We'll have to call him Dumbo," said the biggest elephant, causing more laughter. Mrs. Jumbo picked up her baby and stalked off to a corner. "Don't pay any attention to them," she said softly. "I think you are the handsomest elephant in the world. They're just jealous. And to show them I don't care what they say, I will call you Dumbo after all." Late that night, the train finally reached the town where the circus was to perform. The animals were unloaded and the tents were pitched. The next morning, a parade was held to announce the circus's arrival. Proud camels led the way, followed by the ringmaster, who shouted to the crowd, "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, come to the big top tonight. We'll make you laugh. We'll make you cry. You'll see feats of danger that will make you tremble with fear. All this and more at the circus." Behind the ringmaster was Happy the Hippo, yawning as he hauled the 33-ton pipe organ along. An endless stream of animals passed through the town. Kangaroos carried their babies in their pouches and hopped along beside bears, while lions roared from their cages, frightening the crowd. Bringing up the rear were the elephants, and last of all was little Dumbo. Clutching his mother's tail, Dumbo looked around in wonder. This was his first parade, and his eyes were round with excitement. He dreamed of the day when he would be at the head of the parade. Lost in his daydreams, Dumbo did not look where he was going. He stepped on one of his ears and tumbled headfirst into a mud puddle. Seeing the little elephant trip over his ears, the crowd began to laugh. "Look at him," a boy shouted. "With ears like that, he must be Batman. He may be blind, but with those big ears, he can't possibly be deaf," cried another boy, causing the crowd to laugh and jeer even more. Dumbo was filled with shame and desperately tried to hide his ears. Tears fell as he unsuccessfully folded his ears about him. A bold little boy walked up to Dumbo and pulled one of his ears. Dumbo cried out in pain. Hearing her little one cry out, Mrs. Jumbo rushed to his aid, trumpeting in anger. She grabbed the naughty boy with her trunk and lifted him to the air. "This will teach you to pick on a defenseless little elephant," she snorted. "Help! Help!" shouted the little boy, who was not so brave when he was dangling in the air. But since Mrs. Jumbo had only wanted to teach him a lesson, she placed him gently back down on the ground. But the crowd had become hysterical, thinking that Mrs. Jumbo was wild. They called for help. "That elephant is crazy! Do something, she's dangerous!" shouted the bystanders. The trainers came running with ropes, which they lassoed around Mrs. Jumbo's neck. Mrs. Jumbo reared up on her hind legs and shrieked in protest, but it was too late. The ropes tightened around her and she was led away. "Lock her up!" shouted the ringmaster. Poor little Dumbo looked on in shock. There was nothing that he could do to rescue his mother. Dumbo looked for the other elephants, hoping to find out where his mother was being held. But when the elephants saw Dumbo coming, they turned their backs on him. "What a disgrace! All that fuss for a floppy-eared imbecile," said one of the elephants. "Nothing would have happened if it weren't for that Dumbo. It's all his fault," replied another. Poor Dumbo sat down and began to cry. As he sobbed quietly in his corner, he felt something tickling his trunk. It was a little mouse. "Don't be afraid, Dumbo. I'm your friend," whispered the little mouse. "I heard what they said about you, and I'm going to teach those gossiping pachyderms a lesson." The little mouse crept up behind the elephants, placing his hands on his hips, let out a piercing screech. The startled elephant stampeded out of the tent without a backward glance. "If there's one thing that scares an elephant, it's a mouse," chuckled Dumbo's new friend. Dumbo looked at the little mouse with admiration. The mouse bowed. "Timothy's the name," he said. "I may be small, but don't let my size fool you. I get around, and no one notices me. I know everything that goes on in this circus. I know that your mother's been locked away. I also know that you're ashamed of your ears. Well, I think they're great. Those ears are going to make you famous one of these days. Stick with me, kid. I've got big plans for you." So Dumbo found a friend in the shape of a sassy little mouse. That night, as the ringmaster lay fast asleep, Timothy crept up beside his pillow and whispered into the sleeping man's ear. "Tomorrow, for the grand finale, use the elephants. Think big, and big means Dumbo." The mouse repeated the message several times to make sure that it had sunk in. The next morning, the ringmaster awoke with a smile on his face. "I've had a wonderful idea for the new grand finale," he said. "I'll use the elephants and that little Dumbo, too. And to think I thought of it all by myself." With that, he rushed off to prepare the act. That night, standing under the spotlight, surrounded by elephants balancing on their hind legs, the ringmaster announced the grand finale. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for this next act. You've never seen anything like this before in your whole life," shouted the ringmaster as the audience held their breath. An elephant climbed onto a large ball. The audience watched in amazement as elephant after elephant climbed on top of each other, forming a tower. "Ouch! Take your foot out of my eye," grumbled one of the elephants on the bottom. "I thought you said you were going on a diet," mumbled another elephant, drooping under the weight of her friend. "And now for the finishing touch," cried the ringmaster. "Dumbo is going to leap from the trampoline onto the top of this mountain of elephants." The ringmaster signaled for a drum roll. The spotlight shone on the wings where Dumbo was frozen with stage fright. Timothy the mouse had tied Dumbo's ears back out of the way. He gave Dumbo a nudge and whispered, "Go ahead, kid. Show them what you're made of." Dumbo gathered up his courage and began to run into the big ring. As he ran, his ears came untied and flopped down. The audience gasped as Dumbo tripped and went flying head over heels, bumping right into the ball on which the elephants were carelessly balancing. For a split second, all was silent, and then a faint creaking could be heard as the elephants began to sway back and forth. The audience fled for their lives while the huge tower of elephants began to fall. Within seconds, panic had broken loose. One of the falling elephants landed on the trapeze, and another clung to her tail. Back and forth they swung. "I can't hold on much longer," shouted the elephant, who was holding on with her trunk. The animal trainers and ringmaster stood by helplessly. There was nothing they could do. Finally, giving a loud cry, the elephant on the trapeze fell, taking her friend with her. As if blown by a strong wind, the tent began to billow and then collapse. Fortunately, except for a few bumps and bruises, no one had been badly hurt. Dumbo, however, was in serious trouble.